I had my coffee. Never too early to talk about that. Never. But I sized up to something the size of my head here for hot cocoa, as you would say down there. Hot chocolate, as we say up here.
Hot
So
chocolate.
I'm caffeinated. I'm ready to, and I'm limber too. So I'm good.
Okay. TMI? No.
Never.
It's a lot for me, like 9 a.m. to start talking about this kind of stuff. Like I'm usually up, but this is such a esoteric topic again. And for me, like, I don't know, we're just gonna see how it's going. Today's Mercury retrograde, the very first day. I've already been having some problems talking, but it'll all be good. It'll all be good. So for everyone who's joining live today, please remember that you can also watch this on YouTube and see Paul's very large, enormous coffee cup that he'll be drinking out of that literally is the size of his head. Or, of course, tuning in via podcast. So today's topic is all about the void. And the void is something that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with. I know that even I was not. It is considered to be part of the spiritual awakening process, but it's also, I think, just something that people go through in life. And if I would have had this information up front, man, my experience would have been so different. So Paul and I are going to be jumping in today, diving in and just kind of exploring all things. So Paul, I want to kick off with asking you, when it comes to talking about the void, I personally feel like there are kind of two different types of voids. Like there's like a personal process that you go through with the void, but then I also feel like there's like the professional void. And I'm just curious if this is something that you have considered or if you would agree or just what your thoughts are on it.
The personal and professional void. So I think they overlap. I think it's hard, at least for me, not to not have them overlap in some way. And so the personal void will slip into my professional life and vice versa. But I think they personally, I think it's the same void, but it just shows up differently in different aspects of your life, different areas.
Yeah, I would agree. For me, I think so much of life, because, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, work was life. And especially, I've worked for myself for over a decade now. And I really do see my life as like the personal and the professional. Like I really try to separate the two, but there's absolutely no way that I can do it. However, I think that especially when you are working for yourself, that the void can be especially intimidating and frustrating. So let's just go ahead and kick things off with like our definitions of the void. If folks aren't familiar, if they don't know what it is that we're talking about. So what is your definition of the void, or what does it mean to you?
Yeah, the void to me is, it's like you said, it's part of the process. Like for some it's the spiritual awakening. For some it's like, maybe if it's more on the professional side, it's pushing through uh it's it's pushing through a barrier that maybe you've had before. And so it's, whether you want to call it dark night of the soul or that professional turmoil, of any kind of turmoil, it's like, to me the void is that eerie quiet after the storm. It's like it's like the tornado has just mopped the city, mopped the town, and then there's that eerie quiet before the birds start chirping again. And so it's that point where you're just staring out into this, what feels like destruction, but for many could be like a cleansing in some way. And so you're staring out at this and figuring, what is going on, what's happening, why this is not how I envisioned it, this is not the way it's supposed to be, quote unquote. And so the void is, it's just that space, that time after the storm, where it's like a reset, it's a pit stop. And it can be frightening, right? Like it can be scary, because this is not something that, like you said, we're not taught this. And when you're thrown right in the middle of it, it's like you panic because it's like, oh gosh, what's this all about? Am I going nuts? Am I losing my mind? So the void is that space after some sort of shift, major shift, where there is quiet. And for some, quiet is very disturbing. Some people prefer the chaos.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of us that's normalized, especially depending upon what type of a home environment we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Dark Night of the Soul, and I'd love for you to kind of share with us like how you view the difference between the Dark Night of the Soul and the void. Because I think the Dark Night of the Soul, especially within the spiritual community, that's a lot more well known, and because spirituality is becoming more understood, I think on a relatable dynamic where it's popping up in all kinds of places these days. Folks have a better understanding of what Dark Night of the Soul is. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you think the differences are there?
Yeah, it is becoming more prevalent. Like people are understanding Dark Night of the Soul more. Uh, I think to me the difference is Dark Night of the Soul is kind of that. It's like that. I picture it as tumultuous, even though it may not present itself that way, but it's like you're shifting from like who you were into like who you're going to be, who you're meant to shift into. A lot of times Dark Night of the Soul is triggered by some sort of catalyst. So for some people it can be anything from their partner breaking up with them. It could be something that either they didn't get that they wanted or they lost that they had, and it sets off a chain of events where they realize this is not what was maybe safe and secure for them before, their beliefs or their foundational stuff. It's like the tower card in tarot, right? It's that foundation just crumbling beneath you, and it's that free falling feeling is that Dark Night of Soul. And it's like this huge big shift internally. It can be external too, but it's in here. And it's that transition, it's that shifting. And to me there's a lot going on in that, right? There's a lot of energy in there.
Hmm.
The void to me is the part after. It's after the dust has settled, after whether the internal external circumstances have started to like shift into place. Then there's that quiet. There's that it's like you're, and for me, I know, and I don't know if for you as well, but during the Dark Night of Soul, I was getting tons of messages from my guides, tons of messages from, I was seeing like, seeing all the feathers and the number, like all that stuff. And I was getting a lot of guidance. But in the void, there's nothing. You get bupkis. You get nothing, right? Because it's almost like you're being forced to go inward, right? So you had all this stuff going on, and you're getting the messages, and you're getting this, and there's like strife and struggle. But the void is just, it's like, okay, now what? And so it's that quiet after. And that can be, like I said earlier, that can be more difficult for people to face, because at least in the turmoil, there's action and there's distraction and there's expansion and contraction moving. But in the void, it's just a lot more quiet. I don't know if that's been your experience.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, for me, my Dark Night of the Soul was first, I think that they always, not always, but I would say the majority of the time come through some sort of painful event, and whether it's someone passing away, which is something I see with a lot of clients, whether it's someone realizing they're just very unhappy in their life and things just aren't working, their marriage, their career, like whatever the case may be, um, coming to some sort of realization. And for me, it was definitely, I don't even know that I can still like articulate it and try to explain it. But that process for me was just, it was great ripping apart of everything that I thought I knew, my values, the way that I saw the world, my spirituality. Prior to that awakening for me, I was a Christian and and I wouldn't have picked up tarot cards and I wouldn't have done those things. And then all of a sudden it was like, I got my own deck, mom. And, completely different ball game. And so I think that, as you mentioned, I feel like that's more obvious for people than the void. And I had no idea, what the void was or what it was that was happening. And for me, it was painful because I think that after coming through something like the dark night of the soul, I was looking for relief. I was looking for a party. I was looking for some fun, not for everything to kind of be taken away in such a different, you know, such a different place. I mean, for me, I really see the void as being this transition from one place in life to another.
Mm.
It's that like middle place where you're just kind of stuck. And for me, it was miserable. I felt so lost. I took everything personally. It was just like, oh, what is happening? I want to like hurry up and get through this. And all
Mm.
of the things that I used to love to do to numb out and to get through periods of life that I didn't want to participate in, didn't work for me anymore. And alcohol being like a big one. I wasn't drinking really any longer, and of course that was not going to be a solution anyways. But I
Mm.
just I really struggled with it. It was very, very unnerving for me. I lost friends, you know what I mean, like the whole nine yard, just things fully cleared away. It's like the water receding back into the ocean.
Yeah, that's a great visual. That's exactly it. Like it is that unnerving because there's uncertainty. There's a restlessness in there, right? It's like that. We're so used to doing things, right? It's almost like that masculine energy gets tamped down, and it almost kind of forces the feminine energy to kind of step in, and just to allow and accept and all that. And but part of like, but okay, good. Let's hurry with the acceptance. Let's hurry because I know that was me. I'm like, that's great. And I was so impatient because like you, like I just like let's make with the loofah. Let's go. Come on. And it it was challenging, and that's part of the void, is that it is challenging you to sit with that, right? There are that you can't distract. You're right. You can't. There's the was it what's that quote? The cure for the pain is in the pain, and so you have to sit with it. And the longer you try to avoid or deflect or distract, the longer you're going to stay in it because you're not learning the lesson. You're not integrating. Like that void is just it's a space of integration. So what did you learn from this whole you know sticky mess that you just push through, of this shedding, of letting go? And it's a place where you're forced to listen to your soul self, essentially. Like you're kind of left on your own. You kept like stranded, right? Like your guides aren't coming through. Your dreams are pretty muted. At least it was for me. And so what was left for me is like, oh, I guess I have to listen to my intuition. And I didn't trust my intuition. That was my lesson, is trusting my intuition, because I just relied so much on other things and people and stuff to guide me. And so I think for me, the void was about learning to listen to my own self, which was scary because I didn't trust it. And so the void was that space for me, right?
Yeah. What are some, I mean, for me, some of the things that, um, so the void in regards to like how it feels, some of the things that I had written down for me, I really felt stuck. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
so stuck, like in quicksand stuck.
Yeah.
Just nothing seemed to work and nothing seemed to happen. Like I'm very blessed, I think, in that I love to work. I love to do things. I take initiative. I don't really hang out. And it didn't matter what I was doing. Things just weren't going the way that I wanted to. They weren't moving in a way that they normally did. The things I was really wanting to manifest in life and create just weren't happening for me. And this is not an area of my life that I typically struggle with. Usually if I want to make something happen, like boom, I can do it. I've done some pretty insane things in my life. I also felt so abandoned by God. I really like
Yeah.
it felt like I was alone. And it wasn't that, I kept showing up and kept being like, hey, God, like having my normal conversations and doing my thing. And God was there, but it wasn't the same. I just felt so alone. And then, of course, that really resulted in enormous amounts of pain and anger for me because it was just like, what the F? I've gone through my dark night of the soul. You've completely ripped apart my life. It is unrecognizable. I don't have people the way that I used to. I don't have the things I used to. I don't even have the relationship with myself that I used to because I'm so different. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do now? But were like some of the visceral things for you that you felt?
Yeah, what you were listening there, I'm like, yes, yes, yeah. And of course, things aren't the way they're supposed to be because it's supposed to be different now, right? And so all those things I used to rely on, they're gone because
Well,
I'm
we're
not
different.
supposed yeah, I'm not supposed to rely on those anymore. And I thought at least in the void there'd be ice cream. Not even ice cream. There was no ice cream in the void. Like something, give me something I can hold on to and enjoy just for 5 bloody minutes. Um, the void felt for me, I just feeling everything you listed, like just you know, like angry and disconnected and stuck. I was restless. I was impatient. Um, just the quiet got to me. I was thinking about. I was reading the other day uh, about Rolls Royce made this car, the Ghost, and they made it so quiet inside, like like recording studio quiet,
Hmm.
that it was making people nauseous because we're used to having some sort of ambient sound, like the motion of the car did not match the noise, and it threw everyone off. And so they had to actually re-engineer it and make it so that you could actually hear things. So they took it too far, like it was too good, right? And so for me, it was kind of the same thing. The void was like that, like it was too quiet. It made me uncomfortable, right? I'm not getting the usual ambient messages and ambient sound of my old life. And it made me like, okay, this is going to make me nauseous. Like, I don't feel connected to this vehicle. I didn't feel connected to myself, this vehicle. And so it was that restless. But oddly enough, there was also a sense of kind of peace. It was kind of weird at the same time. So there was all this uncertainty and, you know, uh, masculine energy wanting to burst out and do. But it was being asked to like, no, sit this one out, champ. um and so it was a bit of that inner peace and just kind of quiet, but there was that anger and stuck and restlessness and all that. But the thing is, I knew deep down, even though um I knew this was going on and I didn't like it, but I knew deep down that this was just part of the process. I just knew I just had to trust it. I couldn't fight it. I was just like, okay, let me just get the lesson here. Instead of fighting it, let me work with it. And that's when I just really started to yeah, just to start to rely on myself a lot more.
So for you, the experience was like you gave in quickly to what was going on.
Surrender.
Right. Which is, of
Yeah.
course, yeah, and we'll get to ways to handle it, but oh gosh. Because for me, it was definitely, I don't surrender to things very well. I don't surrender to people well. Someone says, Anna, you should think this way. And I say no 100%, just like right off the bat. And then I actually have to, maybe I'll take it in after they've walked away or after I've had a minute. And even if I agree with them, it'll take me a minute to even get there. But my first inclination is always like, no, or, pushing back on it. Um, so for me, it was not, I mean, the thing is like sure, I had these moments of peace here and there, but it was in moments where I was letting go. It was in moments where I was having fun, or it was in moments, you know what I mean, where I wasn't
Mhm.
thinking about my situation. But it was like as soon as I would come back to my situation, or maybe come back to my work, and I would want things to go back to the way that they were, then I would step back into, this space. Plus, I think for me, I've always had so much connection with the spiritual world my entire life that it was just very unnerving for me. Um,
Mhm.
and when I was reading about the void, because you and I were talking before, about this, and I really wanted to have a kind of a better understanding and grasp of like what the hell the void even is. Like I needed help kind of articulating it. But one of the things that I read is like this is just like one of the steps. And for me, I think I've gone through two different big voids in my life that I can think like I don't think this is just like one time thing, or like, or it's something like I read once that it can last years. And perhaps, I think I've fought quite valiantly and it still didn't last anywhere near that long for me. But I think that this is something that you can come back to multiple times in your life, depending upon the life that you're living. And
Yeah.
I think when you live a bolder life that makes big decisions and takes big turns, that you're going to meet that void more often. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think you're gonna hit it's not just like one and done. I think kind of I was thinking as you're talking about, the hero's journey, right? Like there's all the different parts where you meet the guide and then there's the struggle and the return, like the whole story arc. And I'm just wondering, it's sort of like the same in a similar way. The void is part of the hero's journey.
For sure.
And so it's a necessary step in the return, I think,
Yeah.
because you have overcome the conflict, and this is like the denouement, or the post conflict, where everything integrates and you pick up the lesson. There's still residual energy from the dark night, but now it's settling in, right? Just like sand and water, it needs time for the sand, like stillness, for the sand to settle to the bottom, and then you get your clarity in the rest of the water. And so it's that kind of shake in the snow globe of the dark night, and then everything settles down, and then you can see things as they're meant to be. But for sure, there's a part of lather, rinse, repeat that goes in, because we're always in growth if we choose to accept that mission
Yeah.
of growth.
Yeah.
And so the void, but I think understanding it more, like I definitely understand it more now. And so, if and when it does hit again, at least it'll be more like, oh, this is okay. Now
Yeah.
we're here now. This is the part of the play that we have to, like, whatever, right? This is act two, and understanding that. And so that's helpful. Like it's good to know, because everyone, like you said, you've got clients and call like people that that are going through it. We all go through it. We may not name it as such, but it's that dip, but it's also the swell up at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time that I went through the void, I had, really hit max capacity with my marketing business. It was just, oh, it was so incredible. I had people reaching out, famous people reaching out that wanted to work with me, and I literally couldn't bring them on board because I was, max capacity with clients. I mean, things were just doing extremely well in my life, and I wasn't happy. And I also knew that as well as things were going, that this wasn't like fully my life path. And I really didn't know what to do. And so I sold a lot of my stuff, and I gave my sweet, beautiful puppy to my best friend, and I moved to Vietnam. And I bought a one-way ticket because I had no real intention on coming back. I was just going to travel and go and experience. And
Mm.
I got there, And of course, because I jump off cliffs in my life, I didn't take into account how big of an effect the time difference would have on my business. You know, I was willing to get up for the 2 a.m. Meetings if I needed to. I was willing to do whatever with my clients. But I got there, and of course, I was by myself. And it was like one by one, I started losing clients, and I wasn't able to hold on to everything that was going on. And life just fully shifted for me there in ways that it's very difficult to explain. But I went through, you know, I think very much a dark night of the soul. I nearly lost my business. I got extremely physically sick, like just all kinds of things happened. And then it got really quiet. And I had to come back to myself. And for whatever reason, that was way easier. Like
Yeah.
looking back, I was able to do that. I think maybe because I was in a completely different country. You know, I didn't have as much of the stuff that I was able to fully control that when I went through the void, you know, here back in the States, back in my regular everyday life, you know, my transition from marketing into what I'm doing now and losing my business in a completely different way. This has just been such a very different journey.
Hmm.
Um, and that giving away, you know, the control was such a difficult thing. And in the void, I'm curious about this, you know, the control that you were able to have. Like how did you work with that? The lack
Yeah.
of control or
Yeah. Well, it's funny as you were talking, what came to me, the word that came to me was purge, right? So everything was being purged from you, and even your body was like, "Rah," just this shift, like just everything had to, uh, people. I just picture this boat and just people just jumping off, right? The things that needed to be removed or being removed. And it showed up physically and it showed up in business. Like, again, to the question you had at the very beginning, personal and business, it's one and the same in many ways. Like, we always say business problems are personal problems in disguise. So the void will, and same as the dark night of the soul, it's going to affect. When I had dark night of the soul, it totally affected my business. Basically shut down, basically made nothing, because I just couldn't do it anymore. Like you, I was making some good scratch, but I was not happy,
yeah.
and I couldn't do it anymore. And so it was that struggle of like, oh, okay, do I shut this down and just search and for what I need? It's like, oh, but I knew I had to do it, right? You just know. And the idea of control, that's huge because you gotta let go. That's the hard part, right? Like, I didn't realize how much of a control freak I was until I had to let go of it. And then I'm like, I am a control freak. What is with that? No, that's supposed to be for like those type of people. I'm not one of them. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm one of them. And so I had to just realize, oh man, I do control a lot. I still do. I still am kind of controlling. So, but I do it just for the betterment of just how I see things and how I want to run things. But I had to let go of control like in a huge way, like the big grand imperial poobah kind of way, and just realize it's not my time. It's universe's time, not my time, not my schedule. It's universe's schedule. And trust, going back to trust that, all right, I'm letting you take control. Let's see how this works out. And that's huge. That's scary. I didn't like that.
No,
I still
no,
don't like it.
no, no, exactly.
Ah,
It's so funny to me. It's like God gave me this image once of like me being like, okay, God, you know, like I want this and I want this and I want this. And you know, God like knowing all things, right? And here
mhm.
I am like this little speck, and I'm like, but
Yeah.
I want it to go this way and then this way and then this way. And God's like, yeah, so I could like take you this way and it would negate all of that crap. Like
Yeah.
like why are you trying to ask for my help and also tell me what to do at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's it's like, oh, that's so cute, Anna. That's nice. No, it's well, it's like the difference between doing God's work and doing God's job. It's two different things, right? And so sometimes we like to do the job of God or the universe when we just have to do its will and understand that and leave the job to them.
Follow. We gotta follow. We gotta play that game, the following game. So I'm curious, like, why do you think the void happens? Like, why is this necessary for us? What is this teaching us? Um, we've definitely talked about a couple of these things, but it was really interesting for me. One of the things that I read was that the void is about resting and recuperating for
Mm-hmm.
like the body and the self and the spirit. And I was like, that was such a huge light bulb moment for
Mm-hmm.
me because of course, like we're talking about going through these dark nights of the soul, right? Where I mean, good gosh, my life was like literally blown up, especially this last time from marketing CEO to spiritual guide. Like that was huge. I mean, here I go from like working with clients for 3, 6 months, 9 months at a time to let me have a reading with you. Like, what the hell? Like, how am
Yeah.
I supposed to make a living, much less talk to people at cocktail parties, much less like, what is this that I'm doing? Like, there was so much there and so much anxiety and frustration. And then the void, like the rest. Oh my gosh. If I would have better understood that again while
Mm-hmm.
we're having this podcast, man, I could have really leaned into that. Um,
Yeah.
that was huge for me.
Yeah. Rest. It's sort of like grief,
Mm,
right? When we
yeah.
sit in grief, it is a pulling back and a retracting, but that's also where healing happens. And we see what happens when people try to skip grief. It's you're just delaying the inevitable. And so the void is, in a way, I'm not saying it is grief, but it's similar to that. We do have to pull back. There is quiet. There is some sense of serenity, if you will, in a strange kind of way. But there's healing, and it is about trusting, relinquishing control, surrendering, integrating the lessons, coming back to self, to soul self, coming back to intuition. For me, what happened in the void, I mean, I enjoy it, is I started to reconnect on a very physical level. I started to reconnect with things I used to love doing. So I picked up the flute again. I started playing chess and nerding out on chess now, reading fantasy books and all these things that I used to love doing, and now I still love doing, you know. And I wouldn't have reconnected with that if I didn't go through the void, because I was still like, it's like, what do I like? What do I want to do? What comes to me in a way that is self healing and self soothing in a way, um, but it's also not distracting. Like something like legit makes me happy, and so that those were things that came through being in the void. And so I think there is that place of surrender. It's this space of coming back to yourself. I think that's the most important thing. And yeah, like resting and resetting and preparing yourself for the next stage.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're talking about this on the first day of Mercury retrograde because, I mean, for me, the way that I see the void is, again, going back to it's that transitionary
Mm-hmm.
part, that transitionary process. And all the things that we do in Mercury retrograde, in a lot of ways, I feel like we also do in the void in regards to restarting, revisiting, reconnecting,
Mm-hmm.
rebuilding, like and resting. Like you can't really kick and scream and fight through the Mercury retrograde. I mean, of course you can, but you will suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the same thing, but it feels to me like the void is really that space where it gives you, it's like when you go through big change, there's that space where it needs to really integrate. And it can't integrate in the noise and in the chaos and in the midst of all the fuss, right? Like we just went through Pluto moving into Aquarius, Saturn moving into Pisces, Mars finally leaving Gemini, like big things. And they all happened within a span of 1 week. And then, of course, like we've all been feeling so weird these past couple of weeks because, like, we haven't integrated those major changes. And so things have been feeling off. And so,
Mm-hmm.
after going through this big dark night of the soul, we need that time and that space to actually integrate everything that happened and then figure out which direction we're going, figuring out, like, you know what I mean? That it's just such a transitionary process to me. Um, and like you mentioned, I mean, I think that it's a huge, huge coming back to self in the midst of
Mm-hmm.
that. Just massive, this new part of ourself, this new human being that we are seeing the world in such a completely different way. Um, did you feel like you were a different person after going through the void?
Oh yeah. What came up as you're talking is just this image of like having surgery, and you've got to now there's swelling, and there's bruising, and there's you have to rest, and you start to feel a little bit better, and like, okay, I want to go and do stuff, but no, dude, you gotta chill. You've got to let this heal. You've got to let this. We got to take the stitches out. We got to medicate, like, and it's that like you said, it's that integration, that reducing the inflammation of the dark night of the soul turmoil. And it is that transition. It absolutely is a transition. And sometimes, we call it the muddy middle, right? Going from an end to a new beginning. And that muddy middle is where all the introspection happens. That's where the self-doubts and fears and worries are seated. But we have to move through that so we can get to that new beginning. And so that's part of the void. That the void may feel um, punishing at times, right? But it's for the highest good, for your highest good, if you accept it that way. And again, it's surrendering to it. If you fight it, like, then it's like ripping your stitches out, right? You have to go back in, get that redone. You're gonna have to sit longer. There's another risk for infection, blah blah blah. You need to sit with it. Like, just chill the f out, dude.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, like, when you were in the void, that you weren't having dreams and you weren't really able to connect with your guides.
Mm-hmm.
Um for me, and I had read this as well, like it's just like total silence with the spiritual side. For me, like, I mean, if I'm not having dreams, I'm honestly usually celebrating because I'm having dreams all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Same.
that would have been great, but that wasn't my experience. And I know connecting with my guides was a very it was more of a, I think what was different was that I didn't feel like I was being met in the middle when I would go to
Yeah,
connect with my guides.
yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly.
They were still there, but it wasn't like, it was like I was having to almost chase them down in a way, like
Yeah,
having to work
yeah.
extra hard. What was that your experience as well?
Yeah. It's like when you have like you have a fight with a friend, and all of their friends are mad at you at the same time. It's kind of like that, right? Like, it's it's so true. It's exactly that. Like, they were there, but it was so hard to connect with them. And they felt aloof, and they felt like, and me, I connect very easily, very quickly. But it was really fractured. It was really weird. I had never getting mixed messages. It was just strange. And I knew they were there. Like, they never leave, but it's almost like they knew that, yeah, we've got to, at some point, you need to be self-sufficient. And this is like, for your higher good. And it didn't last like forever. I mean, it lasted for a time. It was noticeable for sure. And then eventually, just little by, as I started to like accept and surrender and move, then the thread started to come back a little bit. Then it started to reconnect. Right now it's like just like the old days.
Yeah.
um but it, and that was scary too, like because you feel like you're abandoned. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it's like your mom leaving you at the fair. Like, where
Well,
am I?
exactly. I mean, like what I was seeing as you were talking is like very much, it's like eventually your parents have to let you grow up and stand on your own.
Yeah.
Eventually they can't make the decisions for you. You can't fully rely on them for all of the things. They really want you to. So they're there supporting you and they're there loving you, but they're not going to give you as, clear signals anymore. I mean, I had zero issues connecting with other people, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But for myself, it was like, and I don't usually rely on other people to get messages or to have guidance, but I needed other people more so even during that process than I do on a regular basis, Um,
Yeah.
and I think this is also a part of, I'm sure that you've seen this before. When clients come to you like a whole lot within a smaller period of time, I think that that's part of that because they're just like, but I need help, but I need help. And I'm not able to figure that out on my own. Um, but we've got to get to that place where we're able to start really standing on that rock by ourselves and saying like, okay, I'm going to take this step and this step may not be the right step, but I'm going to trust in myself because this feels right for me at this moment in time. And I'm just going to trust and I'm going to see where it takes me and I'm going to go for it. And I don't think that we can do that when we fully are being held up by everything.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. It's like the trust fall thing, right? Right.
Yeah.
It's like will like knowing that no matter what, you'll have your team there, but in the end it's you, right? Like this is your life. You're down here for a reason. It's they're chilling like a villain wherever they are, just doing their thing. They're there to support and guide you, but it's us being here now, right? And it's lovely in many ways, right? Because it is this, it's like a growing up, right? It's after school TV special of growing into something bigger than you thought you'd be into. And so the void is just that, it's that canvas that this gets painted on.
I think it can be a lot more lovely when you understand what the hell is happening
Yeah.
versus versus not. I mean, because yeah, it was not like even in the midst of, I shared with you like going through and like reading articles about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I would have like, understood more so what was happening, like this could have been such a different experience for me.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, I mean, would you have had the same outcome if you understood it more?
I think that, I was just telling a client this yesterday in our session. There's that story in the Bible of the people like going around the mountain, like for however many years, right? And growing up, I was always like, what the hell? What's wrong with these people? Did they know to like take a left somewhere, take a
Yeah.
right, do something different? And yet I look at my life and I look at humans in general, and we go around the same mountain a million times. So I
Hmm.
think that if I had known more about it, I mean, first of all, I'm a third line. So I learn by failing. That's that's what I do. But I think that if I would have read about it, there would have been less fighting. I'm sure I still
Hmm.
would have fought, but there would have been less pain, I think, in the midst of that
Yeah.
process for me. I would have been able to step more into my feminine. I would have been able to just have a better understanding of what it was that was going on. I mean, I'm still stubborn and strong-willed, and so I don't think it would have been all like, roses and butterflies, but
Hmm.
I just think it would have, you know, been easier for me and will be so moving forward. So, I think that for people who are able to learn about what the void is, whether they're like going through it or they haven't gone through it or they're in the middle of it, I mean, I think if they come across that information, it's for a purpose and a reason, you know.
Mhm.
If not, then not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I asked that just for myself as much as, it's
Yeah,
I didn't know anything about it, so I guess I was meant to not know about it
yeah.
and uh to get through whatever it is. And there's some folks that are meant, anyone's listening right now, are meant to understand more of this, and that may be what they need to keep them there until
Mm-hmm.
they're ready to transition. So yeah, I mean, it's all good in the end. It's
For
there's
sure.
no right nor wrong. It's everyone's got their different depths that they need to go to get the lesson. Some people can, it's like the elevator only goes down, we talk about. And so, and people like me, I need to hit the bottom and then keep going past before I'm like, oh, I should probably change something. Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Or some people are like, they hit one or two floors down, like, yeah, I'm done. I'm getting out of here. I'm like, oh, wish I had
You got
that.
to hit it like 10 times.
I gotta get it.
Face smeared, sunken
Oh,
skull.
yeah. Oh, I know. Don't. I'm well aware of that. Oh my gosh.
So let's talk about some solutions, some ways for navigating this and just really kind of make it clear for folks. So let's like what is some of your advice for for making it through the void? What are some of your recommendations?
I mean, we mentioned a lot of these already, but I think I know we hear this is so it's so trite sometimes, but like really do take care of yourself. Like really be in that self-care mode, that feminine, divine feminine. Like rest when you need to rest. Like just rest. If given the choice between doing X and napping, always nap. Um it's the allowing and accepting. Obviously if you feel like what I did is to trust, accept, allow, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of doing, if you're not going to lie on the couch all day necessarily, but if you're going to do something that is intuitive. Like like, so for me, again, it was like, I think I had this call, I'm going to play the flute again. I haven't played in 34 years, but I'm getting this huge nudge to do that. And I went and bought one. So I'm taking action. So I'm doing that. Like it's like what is nudging you, what's poking you in the ribs. Like experiment with that, play with that. It's like a playground. And so just try new things. What comes to you. Maybe it could also be letting go. Maybe there's friendships you need to let go of. Maybe there's some people in your life that if you're getting a nudge that they're not meant to be there anymore, then maybe it's time to take action on that. Right. And like I said, purging, there might be things you might want to let go of, how you're supposed to be and act and do. Maybe it's time to let some of those masks fall away. So shadow work was something I did in that time as well.
Mhm.
And just like, why am I getting triggered with this? So it's really this space of, you can take action, but like aligned action, in align with your intuition. Like experiment, play with it. If your intuition says, don't go to this coffee shop, go to this coffee shop, go to that other coffee shop, experiment. It's clear outside, but I'm getting nudged to take an umbrella, take an umbrella. Like just really tap more into your intuition and let it guide you more. So to me, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, because it is such a transitory process and you're going from one state of yourself to another state of yourself,
Mhm.
and it is about growing up, I think doing things that really help you to get to know yourself more
Yeah,
is just massive,
huge.
I think meditation is huge, like just learning how to be with yourself, be with
Mhm.
yourself in silence, be with your body, like how does it feel, touching into to your heart, to your stomach, to what it feels like to be in a human body, watching those thoughts come across your mind and just taking into account what is there for you. um really appreciating time alone and feeling into what that feels like for you. Like you said, I mean, friends, maybe I think friends, like for me, I lost a ton of friends in that
Mhm.
process. I had a very active social life leading up to that, and things just really quieted down. Of course, the pandemic only accentuated that, but still at the same time, it was, it was very different for me because I've always had people around me. I've always had people in my life, and
Mhm.
I've always loved my alone time. So it's not like that was necessarily hard, but this was such a different type of alone. But feeling into that, really learning how to truly appreciate this new Anna in this new period of time, thinking about why I make the decisions that I do, why I get triggered the way I do. I think shadow work is a fantastic um, thing to do in that space. Also, I really think it's important to not take things personally while going through the
Yeah.
void as much as possible, just to really and again, that's like why for me that was like one of the most painful parts of it because I took it so personally.
Mhm.
And if I wouldn't have, taken it so personal that like, okay, my guides are being quieter and God's being quieter and I'm more alone now and it would have just it would have been such a different, kind of experience. Um, so I think that's really, really important. But having a better understanding that this really is about getting to know yourself all over again. So what can you do? I love that you started playing flute. I think that's huge. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful example of like, oh, hey, Paul in this part of my life wants to play the flute. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah. It's there is a lot of releasing and and relinquishing, but also um reconnecting, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and also, yeah, being careful not to get into victimhood.
Yeah.
Like, oh, why is this happening? And it's just, this is happening. I know it's again a very cliche thing, but why is this happening? Like, instead of why is this happening to me, why is this happening for me? And just kind of reframing that, and just like, what's the lesson in here for me? Like, what is this teaching me? What's the big gift here for me right now? And when you can reframe it like that as often as you can, then you can start taking that edge off in terms of, oh, this is the worst timing. I was just about to buy a house, or I'm just about like what. There's always going to be something, right? But maybe you weren't meant to buy that house, or maybe you weren't, like, whatever it is. There's always something that's going to be better, you know. But you got to go through the muck and the mire to get that right. It's just not going to be handed all to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very heart-centered experience. I mean, like that's where we should go. That's why and like kind of as you're talking about, like I love this question, like why is this happening for me? But I think for me personally, like that took me more into like my masculine of wanting to fix it and wanting to
Yeah.
understand it
Yeah.
versus like being more in my heart in regards to just kind of being in it, and like letting go of that control. And because I definitely think that shifting into that feminine is going to be a really huge part of the process and be really helpful, to make it more navigable. Um, I'm such a mental person anyway, and such a very masculine energy,
Hmm.
like shit, I can do anything, but ask me to sit still for long periods of time,
Yeah,
we're
that's
gonna have a problem.
I hear you. It's a challenge. It's a challenge because in this world, it is such a masculine um, based, where like everything is about accomplishment and doing and all that, and the feminine is not. It's not revered in the way that I feel like it needs to be, because there is power and strength in the feminine, and the feminine, divine feminine, is about change, right?
Yeah.
If the divine masculine is about consciousness, divine feminine is about change and being erratic, but in a good way. And it's about that shifting. And so you're being asked to sit in that feminine. And for many people, that's a challenge,
Yeah.
right? Because we're just so used to go, 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 do, ba, ba, ba. And that's being taken off the table for the moment, and just saying, yeah, that's nice, but that that's not needed right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on surrender because
Whole
it's
episode, whole episode.
so huge. So just real quick, a couple of the other things that I had on my list for folks. So, you know, learning about the void, I think, is important. Like, dive into some articles, read some things online. Just, it might give you more perspective, more context about what's going on. I think that when we can learn about what it is we're experiencing, that can really help.
Mhm.
Again, while we're doing this podcast, um, talking with loved ones, with friends, being able to really lean on people and vent to certain people, I think is just massive in this sort of a process. I mean, I'm so thankful to my partner who just continued to support me and let me, I also think working with anger, if that is an emotion that comes up for you, that was such a big part of my process in regards to really being able to release those emotions from my body, you know. But having people in your corner, especially if there's someone who can understand what you're going through, huge, just absolutely huge. So, is there any kind of last little things you want to throw out there, Paul?
No, I think what you said was spot on. It is good to have people that you can commiserate with who understand it, and even if they don't understand it, who can just sit with you,
Exactly.
right? Can just
Yeah.
just sit with you, and they don't have to understand it because you may not understand it entirely yourself, right? So it's if you have someone that's supportive, that's wonderful, or even commiserating online. Um, I think that's important. I'm glad you mentioned that because you don't have to be alone. It's your journey, but you don't have to be alone in that. And having other like even like reading what other people have gone through, listening to what people have gone through, that's like, oh, okay. I'm not going crazy. I'm not going like you just even hearing other people's stories can make a huge difference. So yeah, no, that's good.
Awesome. So, Paul, as we wrap up here, how can folks connect with you and what are some things that you've got coming up in your
Well,
business or
thanks
going
for
on with
asking.
you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've got lots of social media handles. I think they're listed somewhere. But www.therealpaulsilva.com is where you'll find all my goodies, all my stuff there. I have podcasts coming up. It hasn't started. It's coming soon. It's called
Gonna be so
Seared.
good.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit different. The background's gonna be a little bit different here, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So this is great practice for me. So I've got that coming up, and just in terms of business stuff, I've got some workshops and presentations that I've got on the schedule. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's nice to get out of the void and be able to do again. So this is now the
1000%.
upswing. Yeah, this is now you're seeing Paul on the upswing post void in real time now.
Yeah. Well, you've got a potential workshop coming in the
Yeah.
near future. And
Yes.
you've also opened up your coaching services to a sliding fee
Yeah, the
scale,
tiered
correct?
tiered payments. So
Yeah.
that's new for me, and I think that's really helpful for folks who really want to do the work, but might just have some financial roadblocks. And I've also got like a 3 session um, deal that just for those quick things, maybe not a void type problem, but something that they really want to work on in terms of leadership and business and life. So that's new as well. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited. All right. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for being here, Paul, and talking about the void
Pleasure
with
as
me.
always, my friend.
All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this was beneficial for you. If it was, please share it with someone who could also benefit from it. Leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify. That's always so helpful. Be sure to join my email newsletter community for podcast updates, helpful resources, a number of different things. Sending you so much love. And don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next time.